When I walked into my living
No.
room and saw the empty space
Oh, that
against the
can't
wall,
be.
I
Who
thought I
would
had
do
entered the
this?
wrong
Oh my
house.
God.
My antique piano
You
was
did what? My
gone.
piano?
For
I sold it, Ma. I
42
got
years, it had
That was your
stood there, the
grandmother's piano.
same
How could
piano
you? I
my
needed
late
the money. I'm
husband played
sorry.
the night
Sorry, I
he
won't bring
asked
it
me
back.
to
It was all I
marry
had left
him.
of her. You
My
sold
son
it.
Michael barely
You
looked
sold our
ashamed.
piano.
"You weren't using it
Mom, I'm
anymore,
so
Mom.
sorry. I
I
didn't know
sold
you
it for
cared this much.
$6,500. Then he
Helen,
admitted he had already
this
spent
is from
most of the money.
Thomas.
I thought that was the
Oh,
worst part.
God.
I was
Okay.
wrong. 3 days later, the man who bought my piano appeared at my front door holding a yellowed envelope. "Mrs. Allen," he said quietly, "we found this hidden inside your piano, and I think you need to know what it says. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope, I'd love to know what you think. Could you forgive your own child for selling something this precious without permission? Tell me in the comments and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there." If stories about family trust and the choices that change us mean something to you, please like this video and subscribe. The piano that wasn't his to sell. To understand why that empty space in my living room hurt me so deeply, you have to understand what that piano meant to me. My name is Leah Allen. I was 68 years old, then 6 years into widowhood, and 3 years retired from teaching music at an elementary school outside Richmond, Virginia. I had lived in the same brick colonial for 37 years. Thomas and I bought it when Michael was 4, and our daughter Rebecca was still a baby. We raised our children there, paid off the mortgage there, celebrated graduations and Christmas mornings there, and eventually learned how painfully quiet a family home could become after the children moved away. After Thomas died, people kept asking whether I planned to downsize. I always gave the same answer: not yet. The house was not too large for me. It was simply full of memories, and the piano held more of them than anything else I owned. It was an old Steinway upright dark mahogany with carved wooden details along the front, and ivory-colored keys worn smooth from generations of hands. It had belonged to Thomas's grandfather before passing to Thomas's father and eventually to him. When Thomas and I married in 1984, the piano came with him. I used to joke that I married a man and inherited a piece of furniture heavier than our first car. But secretly, I loved it from the beginning. Thomas played beautifully, not professionally. He never pretended to be that talented. But he had the kind of touch that could make an ordinary song feel personal. The night he proposed me, he played Always while I sat beside him in his parents' living room. Then he stopped halfway through, reached into his jacket, and pulled out a ring. 42 years later, I could still remember exactly how his hands trembled. That piano followed us through every stage of our marriage. When Michael was 6, I taught him "Mary Had a Little Lamb" on it. Rebecca learned Christmas songs there. Thomas and I argued beside it, laughed beside it, wrapped birthday presents on its closed lid, and took photographs of our children standing in front of it before school dances. After Thomas died, I played less. My hands had begun bothering me. Arthritis made certain chords difficult, especially in cold weather. But not playing something every day does not mean you have stopped loving it. Michael apparently did not understand that distinction. In the months before the piano disappeared, he had started talking about my belongings differently. At first, I thought he was being practical. "You should probably make a list of the valuable stuff, Mom," he said one Saturday while helping me replace a smoke detector. "That way Rebecca and I know what's what someday." Someday. I noticed the word, but I ignored the discomfort it caused. He photographed Thomas's old woodworking tools in the garage. Then he took pictures of my grandmother's china, 2 antique lamps, and a walnut sideboard in the dining room. For insurance, he explained. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. Michael was 41, married to Natalie, and running a residential remodeling business he had built over nearly 12 years. He had always been ambitious. Lately, however, ambition seemed to sit differently on him. His phone never stopped ringing. He checked emails during dinner. He complained about subcontractors' material prices, clients delaying payments. Whenever I asked if everything was all right, he smiled. Just growing pains. I wanted to believe that too. One Sunday afternoon, he stood beside the piano and ran his fingers across the top. "You ever think about getting rid of this thing?" I looked up from the book I was reading. "No," he laughed. "I'm serious. It takes up half the wall. It has taken up half the wall since you were 4. You barely play anymore. That doesn't make it disposable. He lifted both hands. Okay. Just asking. Then he asked whether I knew what it was worth. I told him I had no idea. He pulled out his phone. Some old Steinways can bring decent money. Michael. He looked at me. I'm not selling the piano. Something in my voice finally made him put his phone away. Fine, Mom. I thought that was the end of it. 2 weeks later, my younger sister Diane invited me to Charlottesville for 2 nights. She had recently remodeled her kitchen and had been pestering me to come see it. Michael offered to check on the house while I was gone. He had a key. He had always had a key. The morning I left, I watered my plants, checked the back door twice, and placed Thomas's framed photograph back on the piano after dusting underneath it. I remember touching the wood before I walked away. If I had known what was about to happen, I might have stood there longer. I might have opened the lid. I might have played one more song. But we rarely recognize final moments while we are living them. When I returned Thursday afternoon, the first thing I noticed was the photograph. Thomas's picture was sitting on the dining room table. For a second, that was all my mind could process. Then I looked toward the wall. Empty. There were 4 pale rectangular marks in the rug where the piano legs had stood. I dropped my overnight bag. Michael, I called him immediately. He answered on the 4th ring. Hey, Mom, where is my piano? Silence. Not confusion, not surprise. Silence. That told me everything. Michael, where is it? He exhaled. Mom, don't freak out. My knees suddenly felt weak. What did you do? I sold it. I gripped the back of a chair. You did what? I got $6,500 for it. That's actually a good price for something just sitting there. I could barely understand the words. You sold something that belonged to me. You said yourself you hardly play. I told you I would never sell it. Mom, be reasonable. That sentence hurt almost as much as the empty wall. As though my grief were irrational. As though 42 years of marriage could be measured in square footage. You had no right. I was trying to help. Help whom? Another silence. This one was longer. Then Michael said quietly, I needed the money. I closed my eyes. That was when I understood this had never been about simplifying my house. Never about arthritis. Never about an old piano taking up space. My son had looked at something I loved and seen money he could use. Give me the buyer's information, I said. There's no point. There is every point. The deal is done. No, Michael. The deal was never yours to make. His voice hardened. Mom, please don't turn this into some huge family crisis. I stared at those 4 marks in the carpet. He had entered my home with a key I trusted him to have. He had arranged for strangers to carry away something I had specifically told him not to touch. And now he was asking me not to make trouble. Tell me one thing, I said. What did you sell? Anything else? He answered too quickly. No, I wanted to believe him. But for the first time in my life, believing my son no longer came automatically. After we hung up, I walked over to the empty wall and touched the faint indentation where one of the piano legs had stood. Thomas's photograph remained on the dining room table behind me. I picked it up and held it against my chest. I'm sorry, I whispered. At that moment, I thought Michael had taken the last piece of Thomas's music out of my home. I had no idea that somewhere across Richmond, a stranger was already examining that piano. And behind its lower wooden panel, something had been waiting in the darkness for years. Something Thomas had left behind. You don't even play anymore. Michael came to my house the next morning. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw strangers carrying the piano through my front door, while Thomas's photograph sat somewhere nearby. I kept imagining the scrape of its legs across the hardwood, the sound of the movers talking casually as they removed 42 years of my life. By 7, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I had forgotten to drink. Michael arrived shortly after 9. He walked in using his key. That bothered me immediately. For 41 years, my son had entered my home without making me feel invaded. Now the sound of that key turning in the lock made my shoulders tighten. Mom. In the kitchen. He appeared wearing jeans and a navy work shirt, with his remodeling company's logo embroidered above the pocket. He looked tired. "Did you sleep?" I stared at him. "Did you?" He sighed and pulled out the chair across from me. "I know you're upset. Upset is when someone forgets my birthday." "Mom, you sold something that belonged to me after I specifically told you not to." "I know. No. I don't think you do." Michael rubbed both hands over his face. "It was a piano." There it was again. A piano. Just an object. Just wood and strings. Just something taking up space. "To you," I said. He leaned back. "Mom, you haven't seriously played that thing in years. That doesn't make it yours. I didn't say it was mine." "You sold it, Michael. That is exactly what you said with your actions." His jaw tightened. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he pointed toward my hands. "You complain about your arthritis constantly. I complain when my fingers hurt. I don't remember appointing you executor of my belongings because of it. That's not fair." I almost laughed. "Not fair." He stood and walked toward the counter. "I came here to explain." "Then explain." He turned around. "The piano needed work. You know that. It needed tuning. It needed more than tuning. And you became an antique piano expert when his expression hardened. You're determined to make me the villain. I'm determined to understand why my son stole from me." His face changed. "Don't call it stealing. What would you call taking property without permission and selling it? I was going to tell you." When he had no answer, I waited. Finally, he said I needed money. The anger inside me shifted, not disappeared, shifted, because however furious I was, he was still my child, and mothers develop an unfortunate reflex. When our children say they are in trouble, some part of us immediately begins looking for a way to save them. "How much trouble are you in?" Michael looked toward the window. "It's temporary. That isn't an answer. My business is expanding." "I thought business was good." "It is." "Then why did you need my $6,500? He winced at the word, my. "Cash flow." I said nothing. Michael returned to the table. I took on 2 large renovation projects at the same time. One client is almost 6 weeks behind on a progress payment. Meanwhile, suppliers still expect to be paid. "How much? It's complicated. Make it simple." He looked irritated. "I had a payment due. To whom? A supplier. How much? About 5,000. And the rest insurance, payroll, things like that." I studied his face. Michael had always been a terrible liar as a child. At 8, he once denied eating an entire sleeve of cookies while chocolate crumbs covered his shirt. At 41, he had learned to hide the crumbs, but I could still recognize the look. "What, aren't you telling me nothing?" "Michael." He pushed back from the table. "I knew this would happen. What, you'd turn a business problem into some interrogation? You sold my piano to solve that business problem. You weren't using it." His voice echoed through the kitchen. We both froze. Michael lowered his voice. "I'm sorry." I looked away. On the refrigerator was a photograph of him at 10 years old, standing beside Thomas with a fishing pole nearly twice his height. Sometimes being a mother means holding 2 versions of your child in your mind at once. The boy you remember, and the adult sitting in front of you. "I want the buyer's information," I said. Mom let it go. "No. The piano is gone. Then I will ask for it back. You can't just undo a private sale. You couldn't legally make the sale in the first place." He stared at me. "You're going to tell some stranger your son stole your piano if necessary." His cheeks reddened. "Do you understand what that could do to me?" There it was. Not what he had done to me. What my response might do to him. "I am not calling the police," I said. "I am asking for the buyer's name." "That's basically accusing me of theft." "I don't need to accuse you. You admitted it." Michael stood. "I paid you back plenty over the years." I blinked. "What?" He seemed to regret the words immediately, but pride kept him from withdrawing them. "I mean, you and Dad helped me. I helped you. Families help each other. How exactly does that make my piano yours? It doesn't. Then stop trying to make this sound mutual." He grabbed his keys from the table. I noticed his hand trembling. That frightened me more than his anger. Michael. He stopped. Look at me. Slowly he did. How bad is it? His eyes moved away. I told you. No. You told me enough to make me stop asking. He swallowed. For one moment I thought he might tell me everything. Instead he said I can handle it. Then why couldn't you handle a $5,000 payment without selling something from my house? His face closed again. I have to get to work. Give me the buyer's information. No. Why? Because you're emotional right now. I stared at him. Those words cut deeper than I expected. Emotional. As though grief invalidated ownership. As though being his mother made my boundaries negotiable. You will give me the information by tonight, I said. And if I don't, I stood. I was 5 inches shorter than my son, 27 years older, and my hands hurt when rain was coming. But in that moment I did not feel fragile. Then I will find it myself. He looked at me for a long time. Then he walked out. The front door closed harder than necessary. I remained in the kitchen until I heard his truck pull away. Only then did I allow myself to cry. Not because of the money. Not even entirely because of the piano. I cried because I had seen something in Michael that morning I had spent years refusing to see. Entitlement. Somewhere along the way, he had begun confusing what I might someday leave him with, what he had a right to use now. That afternoon I went through my desk looking for anything connected to the piano. Insurance records, old receipts, photographs. I found a folder Thomas had labeled Household Inventory, but the piano entry contained only a serial number and a handwritten note, Allen Family Steinway. Do not dispose. I traced Thomas's handwriting with my finger. Then I noticed something else. On the desk beside me sat the laptop Michael sometimes used when he worked from my house. He had used it the morning I left for Charlottesville. And when I opened the browser, his email account was still signed in. I did not go searching through his messages. I didn't have to. Right there near the top of the inbox was a subject line, Payment Confirmation, Steinway Piano. My heart began pounding. I clicked it. There was the amount. $6,500. And beneath it the name of the man who had bought my piano. Samuel Carter. For the first time since I had returned home, I had somewhere to direct my anger. What I didn't know was that Samuel Carter had already discovered something Michael had missed. Something hidden behind wood that had not been opened in decades. The receipt. I stared at Samuel Carter's name on the screen until the letters blurred. Below, it was an email address, a phone number, and an address in Mechanicsville, less than half an hour from my house. For a moment I felt relieved. Then another emotion took its place. Fear. Until then, getting the piano back had existed as a simple idea in my head. Michael had sold something that belonged to me, so naturally I would find the buyer, explain what happened, return the money, and bring it home. But life rarely works as neatly as our anger imagines. What if Samuel had already resold it? What if he refused to believe me? What if Michael had signed paperwork claiming the piano belonged to him? And there was another problem. The $6,500. I could repay Samuel myself if necessary. I had savings. Thomas and I had always lived carefully, and my retirement income was comfortable. But doing that would mean paying for Michael's decision. Again. That thought stayed with me. I copied Samuel's phone number onto a yellow notepad, then I called. He answered after 3 rings. Hello, is this Mr. Samuel Carter? Yes, my name is Leah Allen. There was a pause. I believe you recently purchased a Steinway upright piano. Another pause. Longer this time. Yes, ma'am. That piano belongs to me. Silence. I closed my eyes. My son sold it without my permission. Samuel exhaled slowly. I was afraid there might be a problem. My grip tightened around the phone. Why would you say that? Your son told me it was a family piano. It is. He said the family was clearing out an older relative's house. My stomach turned. An older relative. That was how he described it. I am the older relative. I see. And I am very much alive. I understand. Something about his voice surprised me. He didn't sound defensive, he sounded embarrassed. I want the piano back, I said. I expected you might. I can return the money you paid. I don't know exactly what my son told you, but he had no authority to sell it. I believe you. That stopped me. You do? Yes. Why, Samuel was quiet for a moment. Because of what I found when I examined it. A chill moved through me. What did you find? Before we get into that, may I ask you something? All right, did your husband ever work on the piano himself? The question seemed oddly specific. Yes. What kind of work? Small things. At least that's what I thought. Thomas was good with his hands. He repaired furniture cabinets, almost anything made of wood. Did he ever remove the lower front panel I pictured the piano? The panel beneath the keyboard was decorative mahogany, darkened by age. I don't know. Try to remember. I closed my eyes. And suddenly I saw Thomas kneeling on the living room rug. It must have been 20 years earlier, maybe more. He had a screwdriver beside him and the lower panel leaning against the piano bench. I remembered teasing him. You planning to rebuild the whole thing? He had laughed. Just fixing something. What, nothing you need to worry about. At the time I hadn't thought twice about it. Yes, I whispered. He did. When I'm not sure. 20 years ago, perhaps. Samuel went quiet again. Mr. Carter, what is this about? I restore antique furniture and instruments as a hobby, he said. I'm retired now, but I spent almost 40 years doing conservation work. All right. When I got your piano home, I noticed the lower panel wasn't seated exactly the way I expected. What does that mean? One edge was slightly different. Nothing obvious. Most people wouldn't notice. But you did. Yes. I waited. I removed the panel. My heart started beating faster. And there appears to be a narrow wooden compartment behind it. I stood so quickly my chair scraped across the floor. A compartment. Yes. What's inside? I haven't fully removed everything yet. Why not? Because after seeing what was there, I thought I should stop. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. What did you see? Paper? What kind of paper? An envelope, possibly documents. I could only see part of it without disturbing the compartment. My knees weakened. I sat down again. Does the envelope have anything written on it? Samuel hesitated. Mr. Carter. Yes. What does it say? I'd rather make sure I'm reading it correctly before I tell you. My frustration rose. You're talking about my husband's piano and something hidden inside it. Please don't make this more mysterious than it already is. I'm not trying to. Then tell me. Another pause. I can see your first name. My throat tightened. Leah, yes. For several seconds, I could hear nothing except the refrigerator humming behind me. Thomas had hidden something inside the piano, something with my name on it. Is there anything else? Part of another sentence. But I don't want to guess. I want to come there. Mrs. Allen, give me a little time. No. I understand why you're upset. You couldn't possibly. I think I understand more than you realize. His voice was gentle, not patronizing. That calmed me slightly. I'm going to document exactly how the compartment is constructed before removing anything, he continued. If your husband built it, I don't want to damage the piano or whatever he placed inside. I looked toward the empty wall. How long? Tomorrow, maybe the following morning. That long. I want to do this carefully. I hated waiting. But Thomas would have hated unnecessary damage even more. All right, I'll call you. And the piano. It isn't going anywhere. I swallowed. Thank you, Mrs. Allen. Yes, for what it's worth. I'm sorry. If I had known the circumstances, I never would have bought it. I believe you. After we ended the call, I remained at the kitchen table with my hands folded around the phone. My anger toward Michael had not disappeared. But now something else had entered the room. Thomas. 6 years after his death, my husband had somehow become part of the story again. I spent the afternoon going through old photographs. There was Thomas at the piano on our 10th anniversary, Thomas helping Rebecca practice for a school recital, Michael at 7 grinning after learning his first song. Then I found a photograph that made me stop. Thomas was kneeling beside the piano with the lower panel removed. The date printed on the back was October 2002. I turned the photograph over. In Thomas's handwriting were 4 words: finally took care of it. I read them 3 times. Took care of what? That evening Michael called. I almost ignored him. Instead I answered. Mom, did you contact the buyer? Yes. His voice sharpened. I told you not to, and I told you the piano wasn't yours. What did he say? He's returning it. I didn't mention the compartment. Something inside me said not yet. Michael sighed heavily. This is going to make everything worse. For whom you don't understand what I'm dealing with. Then explain it. I can't right now. You mean you won't? Silence. Michael, I need to ask you something. What? When you sold the piano, did you inspect it? Inspect it. Open the panels. Look inside. Numb. Why would I? My eyes went to the photograph in my hand. No reason. After we hung up, I placed the photograph beside Thomas's framed portrait. For the first time since he died, I found myself speaking to him aloud. What did you do, Tom? The house gave me no answer. But the following afternoon at 2:17, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Samuel Carter was standing on my porch. He held a yellowed envelope carefully in both hands, and across the front in handwriting I would have recognized anywhere was my name. Leah. 3 days later. For several seconds I could not move. Samuel Carter stood on my porch holding that yellowed envelope as carefully as if it were made of glass. He was probably in his early 70s, tall and slightly stooped with silver hair and the broad, weathered hands of a man who had spent his life working with wood. He wore a brown jacket over a plaid shirt, and there was something almost apologetic in his expression. But I barely noticed him. I was staring at the handwriting, Thomas's handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards, grocery lists, tax documents, notes, left beside the coffee maker, and hundreds of little messages throughout our marriage. There was no possibility I was mistaken. Written across the front were the words, "For Leah, if this piano ever leaves our family." My hand went instinctively to my mouth. Oh, Thomas. Samuel lowered his eyes. I thought you should open it yourself. How long was that inside there? I couldn't tell you. Please, come in. I stepped aside. Samuel entered the living room and immediately looked toward the empty wall where the piano had stood. I imagine this room feels strange without it. You have no idea. I think I might. We sat at the dining room table. I placed the envelope in front of me, but did not open it immediately. Part of me wanted to tear through the paper. Another part was afraid. 6 years had passed since Thomas died. 6 years since I heard his voice. 6 years since I sat beside his hospital bed holding his hand while his breathing became quieter. Grief changes over time, but it does not disappear. It simply learns the floor plan of your life and finds places to sit quietly. Now my dead husband had sent me a message from inside a piano. How did you find it? I asked. Samuel folded his hands. I removed the lower panel yesterday morning, and the compartment, it was cleverly done. Your husband or whoever built it added a thin false backing behind one of the support rails. That sounds like Thomas. He was skilled. He could build almost anything. Samuel nodded. The compartment wasn't designed to hide something from a professional inspection forever. It was more like a private storage space. You'd never notice it unless you removed the panel and knew what you were looking at. What was inside the envelope? Nothing else. You didn't open it, no. I looked at him. You could have. It had your name on it. Something about that simple answer moved me. After what Michael had done, respect for something that belonged to me felt almost unfamiliar. Thank you. Samuel nodded toward the envelope. There's something else you should know before you open it. My stomach tightened. What? When I inspected the piano, I found markings that made me curious. What kind of markings? Manufacturing details, serial information, construction features. I don't understand. I don't want to get ahead of the documents, Mrs. Allen. But I don't believe your son understood exactly what he sold me. Michael knew it was a Steinway. Knowing the name and knowing the instrument are different things. I looked again at the envelope. What do you think it's worth? Samuel shook his head. I'd rather not guess yet. That answer frightened me more than a number would have. I slid my finger beneath the flap. The adhesive had dried long ago, and the envelope opened with almost no resistance. Inside were several folded sheets of paper, 2 photographs, and a document printed on thick cream-colored stationery. I recognized Thomas's handwriting on the first page. My hands began trembling. Dear Leah, if you are reading this, then the old piano has finally left our family, or somebody has tried to make that happen. I stopped. Samuel quietly stood. I can give you privacy. No. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Then I softened it. Please stay. He sat again. I continued. I hope it left because you chose to let it go. If that is the case, then I hope whoever owns it next understands that they bought more than wood strings and ivory. But if you did not choose to let it go, then I'm sorry because that means something I worried about may have happened. My chest tightened. Something he worried about. I turned the page. The next paragraph was shorter. Before you do anything, look at the appraisal enclosed with this letter. Then look at the photographs and the restoration record. Do not let anyone tell you this piano is ordinary. I immediately reached for the cream-colored document. At the top was the name of a piano restoration and appraisal company in New York. The date was May 2002. I scanned the page. Steinway and Sons, late 19th century, mahogany case, original components, serial number. Then my eyes found the valuation, $31,500. I stared at it. That can't be right. Samuel leaned slightly forward. What does it say, $31,500? He nodded slowly. That would have been believable for the right instrument at that time. I looked up. Michael sold it for $6,500. I know. My stomach turned, but the money was almost secondary. Why didn't Thomas ever tell me? Samuel glanced toward the letter. Maybe he did. I returned to the pages. Thomas explained that he had discovered the piano's unusual history while making repairs. A serial number inquiry led him to a specialist, and eventually he transported the instrument to New York for inspection, while I believed it was undergoing ordinary restoration locally. That part almost made me laugh. Thomas had been terrible at keeping birthday surprises, yet somehow he had hidden this for decades. Then I reached the sentence that erased my smile. I did not tell Michael or Rebecca what I learned. My fingers stopped. Samuel noticed. Are you all right? I don't know. I kept reading. Thomas wrote that Rebecca had never cared much about possessions. Michael was different. Even in his 20s, he measured success through cars, houses, watches, and money. Thomas loved him deeply, but he worried about him. One sentence stood out. Michael is a good man, Leah. But good people can still develop dangerous habits when someone keeps protecting them from consequences. I closed my eyes. Images came rushing back. Michael at 23, needing help with credit card debt. Michael at 28, asking Thomas to cover a business loan payment. Michael at 34, borrowing money after a contractor dispute. Each time we helped. Each time I called it family. Thomas apparently had begun calling it something else. I opened my eyes and looked at Samuel. My husband thought our son might someday sell this piano. Samuel did not respond immediately. Finally he said, maybe he feared someone would. I looked down at the photographs. One showed the piano's serial number. The other showed Thomas standing beside it in a workshop, smiling with one hand resting on the mahogany case. He looked healthy, alive. I touched his face with my fingertip. There was another document beneath the appraisal. A restoration record, detailed repairs, original hardware preserved, replacement parts carefully documented. Everything someone would need to establish the instrument's identity. Samuel studied the papers without touching them. These documents matter, he said, for insurance, for provenance. I frowned, meaning they help establish what the piano is, where it came from, and what has been done to it. Is that unusual? For an instrument, this old documentation can be extremely important. I looked toward the empty wall. How much do you think it's worth now? Samuel inhaled slowly. I still won't give you a number without having the right specialist examine it. But he hesitated. But I can tell you one thing with confidence. What? He glanced at the old appraisal. Your son had no idea what he sold. The words landed heavily. Michael had believed he was taking a piece of furniture worth $6,500. But Thomas had known better. And apparently, he had known something about our son, too. I returned to the letter. There were 2 pages left. I started reading the next one. Then I saw Michael's name again. This time Thomas had underlined it. And underneath was a sentence that made my blood run cold. If Michael is the reason this piano left your house, Leah, please do not give him money to fix what happens next. I read it twice. Then a third time. 6 years after Thomas's death, my husband was warning me not about an antique piano. He was warning me about our son. Thomas's secret. I read that sentence until the words stopped looking like words. If Michael is the reason this piano left your house, Leah, please do not give him money to fix what happens next. My first reaction was anger. Not at Michael, at Thomas. It sounds unreasonable now, but grief is rarely reasonable. How could you write this about your own son? I whispered. Samuel shifted uncomfortably. I can leave you alone. No. Please. I folded the letter carefully and pressed both hands against the table. For 6 years I had preserved an almost perfect version of my husband in my memory. Thomas had been patient, practical, protective. The man who checked the doors before bed and filled my gas tank whenever he noticed it below half. But Thomas had also been more willing than I was to say unpleasant things out loud, especially about Michael. I picked up the letter again. Thomas explained how he had discovered the piano's history in 2002. One autumn afternoon, a sticking pedal had annoyed him enough that he removed the lower panel. While examining the mechanism, he noticed an old manufacturer's marking that did not match what he expected from an ordinary upright. Curiosity did the rest. He contacted Steinway using the serial number and eventually spoke with a specialist in New York. What he learned surprised him. The piano had been manufactured in the late 19th century and ordered with custom mahogany cabinetry. Several original components that were often replaced during later restorations remained intact. More importantly, Thomas's grandfather had apparently maintained it unusually well. Thomas paid to have it evaluated and partially restored. He told me the piano was being serviced. I never asked what that meant. That was marriage after enough years. Sometimes trust meant not requesting an itemized explanation. The appraisal came back at $31,500. In 2002. I looked at Samuel. That was a lot of money to us then. It was a lot of money to almost anyone. We still had a mortgage. Rebecca was in college. Michael had just finished school. Why didn't your husband sell it? The question almost offended me. Then I realized Samuel was simply asking, because it belonged to his family. Samuel nodded. And because Thomas never believed value and price were the same thing. I returned to the letter. Thomas had written, I considered telling you immediately, but I knew you would worry about insuring it, protecting it, maybe even whether keeping it was irresponsible when we had tuition and a mortgage. I wanted the piano to remain a piano in our home, not become a dollar amount, sitting against the wall. That sounded exactly like him. Then came the part about our children. Rebecca, he wrote, had never shown much interest in inheritance. When she was 22, Thomas once asked which family possessions she hoped to have someday. She said his recipe box, not the house, not jewelry, not furniture, a wooden box containing handwritten recipes. Michael had answered the same question differently. The house, probably. Thomas had laughed at the time. Later it bothered him. Michael was not cruel. Thomas emphasized that repeatedly. He was ambitious, competitive, impatient, and he had developed an unfortunate habit of treating future success as though it had already arrived. That habit had cost him money more than once. When Michael was 23, he bought a car he could not afford. Thomas paid off part of the loan after Michael fell behind. At 28, Michael invested in a contracting partnership that collapsed. We helped cover the debt. At 34, a dispute with a client left his new remodeling company short on payroll. Thomas lent him $18,000. Michael repaid only half before Thomas became ill. I had never demanded the rest. At the time, I thought that was kindness. Now I wondered what lesson Michael had actually learned. Thomas's letter continued. You have always seen the frightened boy inside him, Leah. I see him too. But sometimes we respond to the boy when we need to hold the man accountable. I had to stop reading. Tears blurred the page. Samuel quietly pushed a box of tissues toward me. I hated when he talked like that, I said. Your husband. He would say I rescued Michael too quick. Samuel said nothing. He thought I made things easier when I should have let Michael struggle. Was he right? I looked at him. It was an unfair question from a stranger. It was also the question I had been avoiding. I don't know. But even as I said it, I suspected I did. I unfolded the old appraisal again. Michael would have been 23 when Thomas discovered this. That fits the date. I nodded. That was the year of the car. Suddenly another memory returned. Michael had been desperate. He owed nearly $9,000 more than the car was worth and had missed payments. I remembered Thomas sitting at the kitchen table saying, he needs to sell it and accept the loss. I had argued, he'll ruin his credit. Thomas answered, maybe ruining his credit is cheaper than ruining his judgment. I had been furious. Eventually, we gave Michael the money. Thomas never mentioned the piano. Now I understood why. If Michael had known there was an object worth more than $30,000 sitting in our living room, he might have seen an easy solution. And Thomas did not want the piano becoming one more rescue. There's another thing, Samuel said. I looked up. The appraisal is 24 years old. I know. The market for antique pianos can be complicated. Age alone doesn't make something valuable. So it could be worth less now. It could. I nodded. Or significantly more depending on condition, rarity, provenance, and demand. I glanced at Thomas's restoration records. You think we should have it appraised again? I think you deserve to know what you own. Those words struck me. What you own. Not what Michael might inherit. Not what someone could sell. Mine. I had spent so many years thinking of myself as the caretaker of family things that I had almost forgotten ownership carried another right. The right to decide. Can you arrange it? I asked. Samuel nodded. I know someone in Alexandria who specializes in historical instruments. If he can't do it, he'll know who should. How long? A few days, perhaps. Do it. Samuel gathered nothing from the table. He left every document exactly where Thomas had placed it all those years ago. Before he stood, he pointed toward the letter. You should finish reading that privately. I looked at the remaining pages. I will. At the door, I stopped him. Samuel. Yes, you paid Michael $6,500. I did. I'll return it. We can handle that after we establish ownership properly. There's no question about ownership. I believe you. But let's document everything. I nodded. After he left, I returned to the table. The house was silent. I read Thomas's letter from beginning to end again. This time I noticed something I had missed. Thomas had written very little about the piano's financial value after the first page. Most of the letter was about Michael, about responsibility, about consequences, about us. Near the end, Thomas wrote, if the piano ever becomes valuable enough to tempt someone, remember this money reveals what people have already taught themselves to believe. I looked toward the empty wall. Michael had seen an old piano. Then he had seen $6,500. Thomas had seen something else coming 24 years earlier. And for the first time, I wondered whether my husband had hidden the appraisal not because he was protecting the piano from Michael. Maybe he had been protecting Michael from knowing there was always something valuable nearby that could rescue him. My phone rang. Michael. I stared at his name before answering. Mom. Yes. Did you get the piano back? Not yet. He exhaled. Good. Why is that good? Silence. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. Because I need a little more time before you undo that sale. I looked at Thomas's letter. How much time? A week? For what? Michael hesitated. To find another way to replace the money. That was the moment I realized the $6,500 had not solved Michael's problem. It had only bought him time. And whatever was coming next was much larger than one unpaid supplier. The second appraisal. Samuel called me 2 days later. I found the right person, he said. His name was Dr. Henry Wallace, an antique instrument specialist who had spent more than 30 years evaluating historical American and European pianos for private collectors' museums and restoration houses. Samuel had sent him photographs of the piano, its serial number, and copies of Thomas's documents. Apparently, those photographs had been enough to make Henry drive to Samuel's workshop himself. That made me nervous. What did he say? I asked. He said he wants to see the documentation in person. Is that good? It means he's interested. By 11 that morning, I was standing inside Samuel's workshop in Mechanicsville. The building sat behind his modest brick house and smelled of wood polish and something faintly metallic. My piano stood near the center of the room. The moment I saw it, I stopped. "There you are," I whispered. It was ridiculous, perhaps, to speak to furniture, but it did not feel like furniture. I walked toward it and placed my palm against the mahogany. The familiar scratch near the right side was still there. Michael had made that scratch when he was 9 by crashing a toy truck into the leg. Thomas had been furious for approximately 6 minutes. After that, he refused to repair it. "That mark belongs to the family now," he had said. I ran my finger over it. Samuel remained several feet behind me, giving me space. "I'm sorry," I said. "For what?" Getting emotional. "Mrs. Allen, I restore old things for a living. People rarely keep them this long without attaching memories to them." A man stepped out from the back room carrying a magnifying glass and a folder. He was thin, perhaps 60, with gray hair and rectangular glasses. "Mrs. Allen." "Yes, Henry Wallace." We shook hands. "I've been looking at your piano, so I hear. And your documentation." He placed the folder on a workbench. "Your husband was remarkably thorough." "That sounds like Thomas." Henry smiled. "He saved correspondence, restoration invoices, serial verification, even photographs showing the instrument before and after the 2002 work. Does that matter very much?" I looked at Samuel. He gave me a small nod. Henry walked toward the piano. "Let me explain something first. Antique pianos are not automatically valuable simply because they are old. In fact, many old uprights are worth relatively little because restoration can cost more than resale value." I felt myself preparing for disappointment. "But yours is unusual," how he pointed toward the cabinet. "The custom mahogany work is one factor. The preservation of original components is another. The serial number and construction details confirm the production period described in your husband's appraisal. So the old appraisal was accurate for its time, yes." And now Henry did not answer immediately. He opened Thomas's folder. "Your husband also preserved information about the instrument's ownership history." "Our family?" "Yes. That helps establish provenance. There are no unexplained gaps in the record." I smiled faintly. "Thomas saved everything. That habit has served you well." Henry continued explaining restoration condition, market differences, and how private collectors evaluated instruments differently from ordinary used piano buyers. I tried to follow every detail. Eventually I interrupted. "Mr. Wallace, forgive me, but I'm 68. I spent 35 years teaching children who raised their hands only after I asked them not to. You can speak plainly to me." Samuel coughed to hide a laugh. Henry smiled. "Fair enough." He removed his glasses. "In its current condition, with the documentation your husband preserved, I would estimate a private market value somewhere between $78,000 and $95,000. I thought I had misheard him. "How much?" "Approximately $78,000 to $95,000. I stared at the piano. Michael had sold it for $6,500. I expected anger. Instead, I started crying. Not graceful tears, not the single tear people wipe away in movies. I covered my face and cried like I had 6 years earlier in the hospital parking lot after Thomas died. Samuel brought me a chair. Henry quietly stepped away. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "No need," Samuel said. "It isn't the money." I know. And somehow I believed he did. The appraisal confirmed something far more painful than the value of an antique. Thomas had been right to worry. For 24 years he had known this piano was valuable and had deliberately kept that knowledge from our children. He had seen something developing in Michael long before I was willing to name it. I had spent those same years defending our son. Michael is ambitious. Michael is under pressure. Michael just needs help getting through this one difficult period. There had always been another difficult period, another loan, another rescue, another explanation. And now Thomas was gone, and Michael had entered my home and sold something he knew I wanted to keep. Samuel sat beside me. There's something we should settle. I wiped my eyes. The sale. He nodded. I'm returning the piano. And I'm returning your money. You don't need to do that today. I do. Your son received the money. My son also had no authority to sell you the piano. You acted in good faith. Samuel considered. I'll accept repayment when the piano is delivered back to your house. Thank you. But I want one condition. I raised an eyebrow. What condition? Let me finish cleaning and stabilizing it first. I almost laughed. You want to restore a piano you don't own, not restore, preserve. There are a few small things I can correct without changing its character. How much? Nothing. Samuel. Consider it payment for one of the most interesting discoveries I've made in years. I looked at the piano again. All right. Henry prepared a written preliminary valuation and explained that a formal insurance appraisal would follow. Before I left, he handed me copies of everything. Keep the originals somewhere secure, he said. I will. And update your insurance. I definitely will. Driving home, I thought about calling Michael. I didn't. I wanted to understand what I was feeling first. When I reached my house, there was a truck in the driveway. Michael's. He was sitting on my front steps. I parked and got out. We need to talk, he said. Yes, we do. He followed me inside. I placed Henry's folder on the dining room table. Michael noticed it immediately. What's that, a new appraisal? His expression changed. For the piano? Yes. Why? Because your father had it appraised years ago. Michael stared at me. Dad in 2002. He never told me, I know, how much I almost refused to answer. Then I decided he needed to hear it. Between $78,000 and $95,000. Michael went completely still. You're kidding. No. He sat down slowly. Oh my God. I watched the numbers move behind his eyes, and that was the moment that frightened me. For just 1 second before shame appeared before apology, before anything else, I saw calculation. How much did you tell Carter? He asked. Everything. Michael stood again. Mom, wait. If it's worth that much, maybe returning it doesn't make sense. I stared at him. What did you just say? We could sell it properly. We. His face changed. I mean you. No, you meant we. Mom, I'm just saying $80,000 or $90,000 could solve a lot of problems. There it was. Not memories, not Thomas, not regret. Problems. His problems. I picked up the folder and held it against my chest. The piano is coming home. Michael looked almost panicked. What about the $500 I'll repay Samuel? No. Why? He looked away. Because I don't have it anymore. I know that. No, Mom. His voice became very quiet. You don't understand. He sat back down and pressed both hands against his forehead. The money wasn't enough. I felt a coldness settle into my stomach. Enough for what? He looked up at me. And for the first time since this began, my son looked genuinely afraid. My business isn't just short on one supplier payment. I said nothing. Michael swallowed. I owe people everywhere. That was when I understood. The piano had never been the crisis. It had only been the first thing Michael was desperate enough to sell. Where did the money go? For a long moment, neither Michael nor I spoke. He sat at my dining room table with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I stood across from him, holding the appraisal folder against my chest, as though it could protect me from whatever came next. Finally, I put it down. How much do you owe? Michael rubbed his palms together. It depends. That is not a number. Some invoices are current, some are overdue. How much? He looked up. Mom, I'm trying to explain, and I'm trying to understand. His jaw tightened. Probably around 80,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. $80,000, maybe a little more. How much more, I don't know exactly. You run the company, I know. You sign the checks, I know. Then how can you not know? He stood abruptly. Because everything changes every week. A client pays late, a supplier adds penalties, a subcontractor needs money before starting another job. It isn't like balancing your household checkbook. The insult was subtle, but I heard it. My household checkbook never required me to sell your property. He looked away. That's not what I meant. Then stop explaining why this is complicated and tell me the truth. He paced toward the window. For years I had watched Michael carry himself like Thomas. Same broad shoulders, same habit of putting one hand into his pocket when worried. But Thomas had become quieter under pressure. Michael became faster. Faster talking. Faster deciding. Faster running toward whatever solution promised immediate relief. I expanded too quickly, he finally said. I waited. I hired another crew last year, then I leased warehouse space. Why we were growing. Were you? He turned toward me. Yes. Or did you think you were going to that landed? He looked down. I had contracts. Had one project was cancelled. And the others, a client is disputing change orders. Another hasn't paid the last invoice. What about the $500 from my piano, payroll and a supplier? All of it most. Where is the rest fuel, insurance? I sat down. So you took something from my house, sold it, and the money disappeared into your business within 3 days. I was going to replace it. The money or the piano silence? Michael. The money. Of course. The piano had never been coming back. Not in his plan. Once sold, it was simply gone. I thought about Thomas's letter. Please do not give him money to fix what happens next. At the time, the sentence had felt harsh. Now it felt frighteningly precise. What else have you considered selling? Michael stared at me. Nothing. Do not lie to me. I'm not. You photographed my china. For insurance. My lamps. Same reason. Your father's tools. His eyes shifted. That was enough. I stood. Michael. I never sold them. That wasn't my question. He exhaled. I looked up what some things might be worth. My skin prickled. Why I was curious. No. Curiosity is wondering whether your grandmother's china is worth anything. You were creating an inventory. That's ridiculous. Is it? He said nothing. I walked toward the garage. Michael followed. Mom, what are you doing checking? I opened the door and switched on the light. Thomas's workbench remained along the back wall. His hand planes hung above it. Wooden drawers held chisels, clamps, measuring tools, and small things I still could not name. I began opening cabinets. Nothing is missing, Michael said. I ignored him. He was right. As far as I could tell, everything remained. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by sadness that I had needed to check. I turned around. My jewelry. His face tightened. Seriously? Yes. I didn't touch your jewelry. My grandmother's china. Numbers. He blinked. What about your house? Have you looked up what it's worth? Everybody knows houses around here have gone up. That isn't an answer. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. I've seen estimates. For what purpose? No purpose. Michael. Mom, stop. I will stop when I stop discovering things you haven't told me. His voice rose. I haven't done anything with your house. The word with chilled me. Not sold. Not borrowed against. With. What exactly could you do with it? Nothing. It's yours. Then why are we discussing it? Because you keep pushing. No, Michael. We're discussing it because you walked into my home and sold something that belonged to me. He turned away. I followed him back into the kitchen. Does Natalie know? He stopped. Know how bad your finances are. She knows business is tight. Does she know $80,000? It isn't her business. I stared at him. She's your wife. I mean, she doesn't deal with the company finances. Does she know you sold my piano silence? Michael, no. That answer told me more than I wanted to know. He knew it was wrong. If he believed his own excuses, Natalie would already know. What about Rebecca? Leave her out of this. I intend to. Good. But I am not giving you money. He looked at me sharply. I didn't ask. Not yet. His expression hardened. You think Dad's letter suddenly makes you an expert on my life? This has nothing to do with expertise. He always thought I was irresponsible. He worried about you. He judged me. He helped you repeatedly. So did you. Yes. The word came out softer than I expected. Michael looked at me. Yes, I repeated. I did. And suddenly I saw the entire pattern. Every emergency had felt unique while we were living through it. The car, the failed partnership, the payroll shortage, the contractor dispute. Each time I had told myself that helping once would allow Michael to stabilize. But perhaps Thomas had been right. Maybe Michael had stabilized only because we absorbed the impact. He had never learned how hard the ground was because his parents kept putting cushions beneath him. I'm sorry about the piano, Michael said. It was the first clean apology he had offered. For 1 second hope moved through me. Then he added, but if it's really worth $90,000, you should at least think about selling it. The hope disappeared. No. You don't even play. Stop saying that. You could put the money in savings. I said no. You could help Rebecca too. Do not bring your sister into this. I'm just saying it could benefit the family. I looked directly at him. Whose family? His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The piano is returning to my house, I said. I will repay Samuel the $6,500, and you will repay me. Michael gave a bitter laugh. With what? That is something you will have to figure out. He stared at me as if I had become someone else. Maybe I had. Before leaving, he paused beside the front door. Mom, if I lose the business, it affects everyone. No, Michael. It affects you, Natalie, your employees, and the people you owe. You're my mother. Yes. Doesn't that mean anything? It means more than you understand. He shook his head and left. I locked the door behind him. Then I stood there with my hand on the deadbolt. For the first time, I wondered whether Michael should still have a key. That evening, Rebecca called. I almost told her everything. But I stopped myself. Not yet. First, I needed facts. I returned to the dining room table and opened the folder containing Thomas's papers. Beside his letter was a notebook I had brought from my desk, filled with dates and questions. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote, "What does Michael believe belongs to him?" Underneath I listed piano, tools, jewelry house, retirement, inheritance. The last word made me uncomfortable. I stared at it. Michael had not stolen anything else. I reminded myself of that. But he had photographed things, looked up values, thought about what could be converted into money. And his reaction to the piano's true value had revealed something I could no longer ignore. My son was not merely in debt. He had begun mentally calculating the value of things that were still mine. I closed the notebook. Tomorrow I decided I would ask him one question I should have asked years ago. Not how much money he needed, not when he could repay it, something much simpler. What exactly was he counting on to save him? I had no idea that his answer was already sitting on a spreadsheet. And on that spreadsheet my home had a dollar amount beside it. My house on his spreadsheet. I did not have to wait long for the answer. Michael called the following morning at 8:12. Can I come over? I was standing in the kitchen spreading butter on toast. For what, to talk? We've been doing a lot of that lately. I know. His voice sounded different. Less defensive. More exhausted. All right, I said. Come over. He arrived 40 minutes later carrying his laptop. That alone told me this conversation would be different. Michael had always preferred talking in generalities when money was involved. Business is tight. A payment is late. I just need a little breathing room. Numbers were harder to manipulate. He sat at the dining room table and opened the computer. I want to show you something. What my restructuring plan. I almost smiled at the phrase. Michael had inherited Thomas's talent for giving frightening things respectable names. What exactly are you restructuring? Everything. He opened a spreadsheet. Rows of numbers filled the screen. Outstanding supplier invoices, credit card balances, equipment leases, payroll obligations, a business line of credit, taxes. I leaned closer. The situation was worse than the $80,000 Michael had admitted. Some debts were business obligations, some personal guarantees, and some were expenses he had been moving between accounts to keep everything functioning. How long has this been happening? About 9 months. 9 months, I thought I could fix it. By yourself, yes. By selling my piano. His face tightened. That was desperate. At least we agree on something. He scrolled down. I'm cutting expenses. I can sell one of the trucks. I can give up the warehouse when the lease ends. I'm trying to negotiate with suppliers. That sounds sensible. I need time. Time for what? For projects to pay out. And if they don't? He didn't answer. Instead, he clicked another tab. This is the longer-term plan. I read the heading. Future capital sources. There were several lines beneath it. Equipment sale, projected retained earnings, possible refinance. Then I saw it. Allen Property, estimated equity, $640,000. At first I did not understand. What is Allen Property? Michael froze. He knew exactly what I was asking. Mom, what is Allen Property? He closed his eyes. Your house. I stared at the screen. My house. The brick colonial where Thomas and I had raised our children. The house whose mortgage we had paid off after 30 years. The home where I still lived. It had become a line on my son's spreadsheet. What does estimated equity mean here? It's not what you think. Then explain what I should think. I wasn't planning to take your house. You put it under future capital sources. Future mom. I pushed my chair back. What does that mean? He rubbed his forehead. Eventually the house will probably come to Rebecca and me. The room seemed to become very still. Eventually. That's all I meant. Eventually meaning after I die. His face went pale. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. He stood. Please don't make this uglier than it is. I am 68 years old, Michael. I know. I could live another 20 years. I hope you do. Then why is my home part of your business plan? It isn't part of the current plan. Then why is it there? He had no answer. I pointed at the screen. Did you tell anyone you expected this money? No. Your bank? No. Your creditors? No. Your accountant? He hesitated. That hesitation was enough. What did you tell your accountant? Only that I might have future family assets. I stared at him. Assets. It was just context. For what long-term planning? I closed the laptop. Get out. Mom, take your computer and leave. You're misunderstanding this. I understand perfectly. No, you don't. He opened the laptop again, desperate now. This wasn't a loan application. I didn't pledge your house. I couldn't. Your name is on everything. That is supposed to comfort me. I haven't taken anything. You took the piano. That was different. No, Michael. The piano is why I finally looked at what you were doing. He stared at me. Then my phone rang. Rebecca. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Hi, sweetheart. Mom, are you okay? Something in her voice made me glance at Michael. Why? Michael called me last night. Of course he had. What did he tell you, that you found out Dad's piano was valuable and now everybody is fighting about money? I closed my eyes. Is that what he said? Michael looked away. Rebecca continued. He also asked whether you'd ever talk to me about the house. My stomach tightened. Asked you what? Whether you plan to keep it long term. Michael stood. Mom, give me the phone. I turned away from him. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. I explained the piano, the sale, the envelope, Thomas's appraisal, Michael's debt, and finally the spreadsheet. Rebecca was silent. Then she said, He put your house on a spreadsheet. Yes. For his business, as a future capital source. Oh my God. Michael spoke loudly enough for her to hear. That's not what it means. Rebecca's voice sharpened. Is he there? Yes. Put me on speaker. I did. Michael, she said. What the hell are you doing? Stay out of this. She's my mother too. I haven't touched the house. You sold Dad's piano. I made a mistake. No. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. You arranged movers. Michael slammed his palm against the table. I was trying to keep my company alive, and Mom is supposed to finance that. I never said that. You literally listed her house as money you expect to have. Eventually, the word exploded into the room. Silence followed. Michael seemed to hear himself only after it was too late. Rebecca spoke first. Do you hear how disgusting that sounds? His face crumpled. For 1 second I saw genuine shame. Then anger covered it. Dad always planned to leave things to us. Rebecca answered quietly. Dad planned to die someday too. That doesn't mean we get to hurry him along on paper. Rebecca. No. You need to hear this. Michael shut the laptop. I'm done. He walked toward the door. I followed him. Michael. He stopped but did not turn around. My home is not your financial plan. I know. My savings are not your financial plan. I know. My possessions are not inventory waiting for you. His shoulders dropped. I know. Do you? He finally faced me. His eyes were red. I'm scared, Mom. That almost broke me. Because there he was again. The frightened boy. The one Thomas had written about. The one I had rescued so many times. I wanted to put my arms around him. I wanted to say we would fix everything. Instead, I remembered Thomas's warning. Sometimes we respond to the boy when we need to hold the man accountable. I know you're scared, I said softly. Michael waited. Perhaps he expected the next sentence to be the one I had always given him. I'll help you. It wasn't. But fear does not give you ownership of my life. He looked down. Then he left. That evening after Rebecca and I spoke again, I returned to Thomas's letter. I had read it several times, yet one folded sheet had remained tucked behind the appraisal. I had assumed it was part of the restoration paperwork. This time I unfolded it. At the top, Thomas had written Leah, if you have reached the point where Michael is counting what he may inherit, there is something else I need you to understand. I sat down. The piano had already revealed its secret, but Thomas's warning was not finished. And as I began reading that final page, I realized the most important thing he had hidden inside the piano had never been the appraisal. It was the lesson I had spent most of my life refusing to learn. The page. I almost missed. I carried Thomas's final page into the living room and sat in the chair beside the empty space where the piano had stood. For 6 years after his death, that chair had become mine. Thomas used to sit there on Sunday evenings with the newspaper folded across his lap while I played. Sometimes he listened. Sometimes he fell asleep. I used to tease him. You're supposed to applaud. I'm appreciating quietly, he would say without opening his eyes. Now the room was silent. I unfolded the page. Leah. If you have reached the point where Michael is counting what he may inherit, there is something else I need you to understand. I stopped immediately. It felt impossible that Thomas had written those words more than 20 years earlier. But perhaps he had not predicted the future. Perhaps he had simply recognized a pattern. I continued. We have helped our children because we love them. I would never regret helping them through genuine hardship. But help becomes something else when the same emergency keeps returning with a different name. I swallowed. The car. The failed partnership. The payroll problem. Different names. Same emergency. Thomas continued. Michael does not fear bad decisions as much as he should, because somewhere inside him, he believes we will prevent the worst consequences. I closed my eyes. A memory surfaced. Michael was 28. His contracting partnership had collapsed, leaving him with nearly $14,000 in debt. He came to our house one evening looking exhausted. I immediately asked how much he needed. Thomas asked something different. What are you going to sell? Michael had stared at him. What? You have a motorcycle. Expensive tools. That television you bought 3 months ago. What are you selling? I had been furious with Thomas. He came here for help, not humiliation. Thomas looked at me. He came here because he doesn't want to make painful choices. We argued after Michael left. Eventually, we gave him $10,000. Michael kept the motorcycle. I had forgotten that detail until now, or perhaps I had chosen to forget it. I kept reading. You have a beautiful instinct, Leah. When someone you love hurts, you want to remove the hurt. It is one of the reasons I married you. Tears filled my eyes. But sometimes removing the hurt removes the lesson with it. I lowered the page. Why didn't you make me listen? I whispered. Of course Thomas had tried. That was the painful part. He had tried repeatedly. I simply believed love required softness. Thomas believed love sometimes required resistance. Neither of us wanted Michael to suffer. We disagreed about whether suffering could occasionally teach something money could not. The next paragraph was harder. If I go before you, Michael may come to you when he is frightened. He may make his emergency feel like yours. Please remember that loving our son does not require sacrificing your security to protect him from every consequence. I pressed the paper against my chest. Thomas had died at 69. He had known his heart condition was worsening when he wrote later notes on that page. The handwriting changed near the bottom, suggesting he had returned to it years after the original letter. One sentence had been added in darker ink: "Do not mortgage your peace to pay for someone else's panic." I began crying again. That sounded exactly like Thomas, practical even when talking about love. I sat there for nearly an hour. Then the doorbell rang. Rebecca stood outside holding 2 coffees. "I thought you might need company." I let her in. She looked immediately toward the empty wall. "It feels wrong." "Yes." "When is the piano coming back?" Samuel says. "Soon." We sat in the kitchen. I handed her Thomas's letter. She read silently. Halfway through, she wiped her eyes. At the end, she placed the pages carefully on the table. "Dad knew. He worried. Same thing sometimes." I smiled faintly. Rebecca wrapped both hands around her coffee. "Mom, I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened. What Michael called me again. When last night? What did he want? He asked whether I would talk to you about lending him money. I stared at her. "How much?" "He didn't give me an exact number." "Of course. He said if he could get through the next 90 days, everything would stabilize." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I had heard versions of that sentence for 20 years. One more payment, one more loan, one more month, one more rescue. "Did he ask you for money?" Rebecca nodded. 20,000. My mouth fell open. "Do you have $20,000 to lend?" "No." "What did you tell him?" "I told him no." "Was he angry?" "He said I didn't understand what was at stake." I looked down at Thomas's letter. "His emergency feel like yours." There it was again. "What if he loses the business?" I asked. Rebecca studied me. "Would that be the end of Michael?" The question surprised me. "No." "Would he lose his family?" "I hope not." "Would he stop being our brother and son?" "No." "Then maybe losing the business isn't the same as losing everything." I stared at my daughter. Thomas would have smiled. Rebecca reached across the table. "Mom, you're thinking about giving him money, aren't you?" I did not answer. "That means yes, I have enough savings." "No, I'm not saying I will." "You're calculating." She knew me too well. I could help without touching the house. And then what he pays suppliers, and if another client delays, I had no answer. "Mom, Michael needs help. But maybe money isn't the help he needs." That sentence stayed with me. After Rebecca left, I called my attorney. Her name was Margaret Ellis. Thomas and I had worked with her for almost 15 years. Her assistant answered. "Ellis Law Group." "This is Leah Allen. I need to schedule a meeting with Margaret. Is this regarding your estate plan?" I looked at Thomas's letter. "Yes." "When would you like to come in?" "As soon as possible." Margaret had an opening the following morning. After I hung up, I walked through my house. The dining room sideboard, my grandmother's china, Thomas's tools, the photographs, my bedroom, the backyard where he planted roses. For the first time, I saw everything through Michael's spreadsheet. Assets, equity, future capital. Then I forced myself to see them differently. Mine. Not because I intended to keep everything forever. Nobody does. But because I was alive. And while I was alive, my future did not belong to my children. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Mom, please don't make any decisions until we talk again." I read it twice. Then I typed, "I am making decisions about my own property. That is exactly what I should be doing." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, his response came. "Are you changing the will?" I stared at those words. Not "Are you okay?" Not "Can we fix this?" Not "Can you forgive me?" Are you changing the will? I did not respond. Instead, I placed the phone face down beside Thomas's letter. The following morning, I would sit across from my attorney and do something I should have done years earlier. Not punish my son, not disinherit him, not take revenge, protect myself. Because Thomas had been right about one thing I could no longer deny. Michael's fear had spent years becoming my responsibility, and it was time for his fear to belong to him. I called my attorney. Margaret Ellis's office was on the fourth floor of an old brick building near downtown Richmond. Thomas and I had first met her almost 15 years earlier, when we finally admitted that having 2 adult children and a paid-off house probably meant we needed something more sophisticated than wills we had printed from the internet. Thomas liked Margaret immediately. She asks uncomfortable questions, he told me afterward. That's what you like about her. That's what I'm paying her for. I thought about that as I sat across from Margaret the following morning. She was 62 now, with silver beginning to show in her dark hair and the same calm expression I remembered from Thomas's estate proceedings. She listened without interrupting while I told her everything. The piano, Michael selling it, the hidden compartment, Thomas's letter, the appraisal, Michael's debts, and finally the spreadsheet. When I told her my house appeared under future capital sources with $640,000 beside it, she removed her glasses. Has Michael attempted to borrow against your property? Not that I know of. Has he asked you to sign anything? No. Does he have power of attorney? No. Access to your bank accounts? Not directly. What does directly mean? He has helped me with online banking before. Margaret's expression changed. Does he know your passwords? He may know an old one. Change them. I will. Today. The firmness in her voice made me sit straighter. All right. Does he have a key to your home? Yes. She paused. That is not a legal issue unless you want it to be. But given what happened with the piano, I would think carefully about it. I already have. Margaret folded her hands. What do you want to accomplish? Accomplish, that question mattered. Because anger had brought me into the office. But I did not want anger making the decisions. I don't want to disinherit Michael. Good. Then we won't begin there. I love my son. I know. I also don't want him treating my property like emergency money. Those two positions are not contradictory. I looked at her. They feel contradictory. Only because parents are often taught that protection and generosity are the same thing. Thomas would have liked that sentence. I took his letter from my purse. I think my husband tried to tell me something similar. Margaret read the final page. Her expression softened. I miss that man. So do I. She handed it back. Thomas worried about Michael. You knew he never discussed private details with me. But when we prepared your estate documents, he asked several questions about protecting assets from beneficiaries' creditors and preventing premature access. I felt a small ache. Even then, Thomas had been thinking ahead. What can we change? Margaret pulled out my existing estate documents. Over the next hour, she explained options slowly. My house remained mine. My retirement accounts remained mine. My personal property remained mine. Nothing about Michael's expectation changed that. But there were areas where I had given my children more informal involvement than necessary. Rebecca was listed first for several responsibilities. Michael was second. In some places, either child could become involved if I became incapacitated. That worries me now, I admitted. Then we change it to what? A neutral professional fiduciary can handle certain financial responsibilities if you become unable to manage them yourself. A stranger. A licensed professional whose duty is to you. I thought about Michael photographing my belongings, my house on his spreadsheet. Do it. Margaret nodded. We can also make your instructions regarding tangible property much clearer. The piano. The piano, jewelry, tools, artwork, anything meaningful or valuable. I want ownership documented. That is wise. And nobody sells anything unless I authorize it. While you have capacity, nobody should be selling anything anyway. The fact that she needed to say it made me feel foolish. I trusted him. Margaret looked directly at me. Trusting your child is not foolish. I appreciated that. But trust without boundaries suddenly felt dangerous. We reviewed beneficiary designations, account contacts, emergency instructions, and the handling of my home. I did not remove Michael as a beneficiary. I did not give Rebecca his share. I did not create some dramatic punishment from beyond the grave. What I changed was control. My children would not manage assets simply because they expected someday to inherit them. If I became ill, a professional would protect my interests. If the house ever needed to be sold for my care, that decision would be based on my needs, not anyone's inheritance. Margaret looked at me over her glasses. Are you comfortable with this? Yes. Certain I thought about Thomas. Yes. By the time I left, I felt lighter. Not happy. Lighter. There is a difference. Michael was waiting in my driveway when I returned. He stepped out of his truck before I had even parked. Where were you? I got out slowly. That is an interesting question from someone who sold my piano while I was away. His face tightened. Rebecca told me you were meeting the lawyer. I made a mental note to speak with my daughter about that. I was. What did you do? Come inside. We sat in the living room. Michael remained standing. Did you change the will? I updated my estate plan. His face paled. So you cut me out? No. That surprised him. You didn't know. His shoulders relaxed. Too visibly. I noticed. But I changed who would manage my finances if I became incapacitated. His expression hardened again. From me, you were never first. But I was listed. You no longer are. Who is a professional fiduciary? Michael stared at me. You're giving a stranger control over family property, my property. There you go again. Yes, Michael. There I go again. He paced toward the empty piano wall. This is insane. No. It is organized. Because of one stupid piano, the words hung between us. One stupid piano. I stood. This is not about the piano. It obviously is. The piano revealed the problem. I made one mistake. You entered my home after I told you no. I know. You sold something you did not own. I know. You spent the money. I said I was sorry. You listed my house as future capital. I explained that. You asked Rebecca for $20,000. His head snapped toward me. She told you. She is worried about you. Everybody is treating me like some criminal. No. We are treating you like a 41-year-old man, responsible for his own decisions. He laughed bitterly. Dad would love this. Do not use your father. He always wanted me to fail so I'd learn some lesson. I felt anger rise. Your father spent thousands helping you, and reminding me of it. No, Michael. I reminded you of how much we loved you. Your father reminded you that money had consequences. He looked away. I walked closer. I am not punishing you. It feels like it. I am protecting myself because you taught me that I need to. That stopped him. His face changed. For once there was no immediate defense. I continued quietly. I hope someday I trust you with everything again. But trust is not something you inherit. Michael's eyes filled with tears. He blinked them away. I could lose the company. I know. I could lose my truck. I know. We might have to sell the house. His house, not mine. I understood the distinction more clearly than ever. I'm sorry, I said. You could stop it. There it was, the invitation. All I had to do was reach for my checkbook. Thomas's warning echoed in my mind. Do not mortgage your peace to pay for someone else's panic. I could delay it, I said. That is not the same as stopping it. Michael shook his head. You really won't help me, I will help you. Hope appeared instantly. Then I finished. But I will not give you money. His face fell. I will pay for an independent financial advisor to review everything. Every debt. Every contract. Every account. If there is a responsible way forward, I will help you find it. Michael stared at me. You want me to hand my business over to some stranger? No. I want you to stop hiding from the numbers. He grabbed his keys. Forget it. He walked toward the door. Michael. He stopped. The offer stands. He left without answering. 2 days later, one of Michael's largest clients postponed a project. By Friday afternoon, a supplier demanded payment before delivering materials for another job. The breathing room Michael thought he had bought with my piano disappeared. And for the first time in his adult life, His parents were not standing between him and the bill coming due. The bill came due. Michael did not speak to me for 5 days. I knew he was alive because Rebecca heard from him, and because Natalie sent me a short text on Sunday evening. He's under a lot of pressure. I'm trying to understand what's happening. That sentence told me something important. Natalie still did not know everything. I typed 3 different responses before deleting all of them. Finally, I wrote, "I love both of you. Michael needs to tell you the truth about the business himself." She replied with only "I know." Monday morning, my phone rang at 6:43. Michael. Mom. His voice sounded exhausted. What happened? Nothing happened. People do not call their mothers before 7 in the morning because nothing happened. He exhaled. I need $30,000. There it was. No explanation first. No apology. A number. What happened, I repeated. Crawford Homes postponed the renovation. The big project. Yes. For how long? Maybe 6 weeks. Maybe longer. And my supplier froze my account because I'm behind. How far enough? I closed my eyes. What would $30,000 do? Get materials released. Cover payroll. Give me room. For how long, Mom? For how long, Michael? I don't know. That was the answer. Not 30 days. Not 90. He did not know. I won't give you $30,000. Silence. Then very quietly, "You have it." I felt something inside me harden. Yes. You could transfer it today. Yes. And you're choosing not to. Yes. His voice rose. I could lose everything. I offered to pay for a financial advisor. I don't need an advisor. I need cash. No. You want cash. What's the difference cash makes today quieter? An advisor might tell you whether the business can survive tomorrow. He said nothing. Does Natalie know you're asking me? Silence again. Michael, no. Then before we discuss anything else, tell your wife the truth. He hung up. I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. My hands were shaking. Saying no did not feel powerful. It felt terrible. That was something Thomas's letter had not prepared me for. Boundaries sound clean when written on paper. In real life, boundaries can feel like watching someone you love stand in the rain while you hold an umbrella. The question is whether giving them your umbrella actually teaches them to find shelter. By noon, Natalie called. She was crying. Leah, did you know I did not pretend to misunderstand? Some of it. He owes over $90,000. My heart sank. Michael's estimate had already grown. He told me 80. There are personal credit cards too. I closed my eyes. Natalie continued. He used one card for business materials, then another to make payments on the first. Did you know? No. Her voice broke. I knew things were tight. I didn't know we were drowning. I'm sorry. He sold your piano. It was not a question. Yes. Oh God. He told you finally. I heard her crying. I'm so embarrassed. You didn't sell it. But I'm his wife. That makes you affected, Natalie. It does not make you responsible for decisions you did not know about. She was quiet. Then she asked the question I had expected. Are you going to help him? I offered help. He says you refused. I refused to give him $30,000. Another pause. What did you offer to pay for an independent financial advisor to review the business and help create a restructuring plan? Natalie exhaled. That sounds like help. Yes. Why did he make it sound like you abandoned him? I had no answer that would not hurt her, so I said nothing. That evening, Michael came home to find Natalie waiting at the kitchen table with printed bank statements. I know because she told me later. Their argument lasted almost 3 hours. For the first time, Michael could not hide behind business language. Natalie wanted numbers. Every account, every card, every invoice. She discovered he had been paying certain business expenses personally because company accounts were short. She also learned he had delayed paying himself, then compensated by using credit cards for household expenses. Their finances had become one tangled problem. The next morning, Michael called me again. I'll meet the advisor. No greeting, no apology. But it was enough. I contacted Margaret, who recommended a financial restructuring consultant named David Mercer. I paid his initial consultation fee directly. Not $1 went through Michael. The first meeting lasted 4 hours. Michael hated every minute. David asked questions Michael had spent months avoiding. Which jobs were profitable? Which were merely generating revenue? What equipment was essential? Why was Michael leasing warehouse space? Why did he need 2 late-model trucks? Why had he expanded payroll before signed contracts justified it? Michael returned from the meeting furious. He wants me to shrink the company. I was sitting in my living room when he said it. What does that mean? Sell a truck. End the warehouse lease when possible. Cut the second crew. Would that help? That's not the point. What is the point? I built this company for 12 years. And now he looked at me. I'd look like I failed. There it was. Not bankruptcy, not hunger, not homelessness. Appearance. You are willing to risk everything because you're afraid of looking unsuccessful. You don't understand. Maybe not. I gestured toward the empty wall. But I understand what your fear already cost me. Michael's expression softened. He sat down. I really am sorry about the piano. I know. I thought I could replace the money before you found out. You thought the problem was getting caught. At first. That honesty surprised me. He looked toward the floor. I kept thinking the next job would fix everything. And when it didn't, I borrowed. And then borrowed again. And then you sold my piano. He nodded. His eyes filled. I don't know how I became this person. I wanted to reach for him. Instead, I waited. After a while, I said, "You became this person one decision at a time." He looked at me. That means you can become someone else the same way. For the first time since this began, Michael did not argue. Over the following week, he agreed to David's first recommendations. He listed 1 truck for sale. He began negotiating payment plans with suppliers. He contacted clients instead of pretending their late payments would magically appear. Nothing was solved, but the hiding had stopped. Then Samuel called. "The piano is ready." My heart jumped. "When tomorrow, if that works?" I smiled for the first time in days. "Yes." Before hanging up, Samuel added, "Mrs. Allen, I kept the scratches." I laughed softly. Good. The next afternoon, a delivery truck pulled into my driveway. Michael happened to arrive 10 minutes later. He had come to show me paperwork from David. Instead, he stopped on the sidewalk. 2 men were carefully guiding the old Steinway toward my front door. Michael stood completely still. The piano he had reduced to $6,500 was coming home. But neither of us knew that before the afternoon ended, he would sit beside it and finally understand what he had actually tried to sell. The piano comes home. I stood in the doorway, while Samuel and the 2 movers guided the piano across my living room floor. "Little farther to the left," I said. Samuel smiled. "You remember the exact spot I lived with that piano longer than I lived with my parents." The movers laughed softly. Michael did not. He stood near the hallway with his hands in his pockets watching. Nobody had invited him to help. Nobody had told him to leave either. When the piano finally settled into place, its legs nearly matched the pale marks still visible in the rug. I stepped back. For the first time since returning from Charlottesville, the room looked like my home again. Samuel had done exactly what he promised. The mahogany looked richer, but not new. He had cleaned decades of grime from the carved details, stabilized a loose section near the base, and polished the brass pedals. But the scratches remained, including the one Michael had made with his toy truck when he was 9. I touched it. "You kept this," Samuel nodded. "You asked me to preserve the piano, not erase its life." My throat tightened. Michael looked down. I handed Samuel an envelope containing $6,500. He checked the amount only after I insisted. "The sale is reversed," he said. "Yes." He gave me the original receipt marked repaid and returned. Something about that small piece of paper mattered. The piano was mine again, not just emotionally, but cleanly and formally. Samuel shook my hand. "Take care of it. I will." Before leaving, he looked toward Michael. They exchanged a brief nod. No accusation, no lecture. That somehow made Michael look more ashamed. After the door closed, silence filled the room. Michael walked toward the piano. Looks different. Cleaner. Samuel did all that? Yes. For free? Yes. Michael ran one finger along the edge but stopped before touching the keys. Dad would have liked him. I smiled faintly. Yes. I sat on the bench. The wood creaked beneath me exactly as I remembered. Michael remained standing. Mom, you don't have to play. I looked up. Why not your hands? I almost laughed. For weeks my arthritis had been one of his favorite reasons the piano supposedly no longer mattered. Now he sounded concerned. I can still play something. I lifted the fallboard. The keys were familiar beneath my fingertips. I pressed middle C. One clear note filled the room. My eyes immediately burned. 6 years earlier, after Thomas's funeral, I had sat in this exact place and tried to play. I made it through 8 measures before grief stopped me. After that, I played less and less. Not because I stopped loving music, because sometimes music opened doors I was not ready to walk through. I positioned my hands. What are you playing? Michael asked. You'll know. The first notes came slowly. My fingers were stiff. The left hand hurt more than I expected. But the melody emerged. Always. The song Thomas had played the night he proposed. Michael recognized it almost immediately. His face changed. I kept going. I missed a chord. Then another. I did not care. As I played, the room filled with memories. Thomas at 28, nervous and smiling. Michael as a little boy, sitting beside his father, pounding the keys with both hands. Rebecca practicing Christmas songs. Birthday candles reflected in the polished wood. Thomas asleep in his chair while pretending to listen. Our whole life seemed to gather around me. Halfway through the song, my hands began trembling. I stopped. The last note faded. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I heard Michael crying. Not quietly. He sat down on the edge of the sofa and covered his face. I closed the keyboard gently. Michael. He shook his head. I forgot. What? He wiped his face with both hands. I forgot Dad played that. I looked at him. He played it often. I know, His voice broke. I forgot. I moved from the piano bench to the chair across from him. Michael stared at the floor. When I looked at the piano, I didn't see any of that. What did you see? Something old. He swallowed. Something you didn't use. And then money. The honesty hurt. But I preferred it to another excuse. I told myself it didn't matter because Rebecca didn't want it, and I didn't want it. You never asked what I wanted. I know. He looked towards the piano. When the buyer offered $6,500, I thought I got lucky. I said nothing. I didn't think about Dad, not really. His eyes returned to me. I didn't think about you sitting here after he died. I felt tears coming again. I didn't think about anything except the supplier calling me. That is the problem, Michael. I know. No. Listen. He did. Fear narrowed your world until the only thing you could see was whatever might make the fear stop. He nodded. And when people become numbers, property becomes money, and family becomes a resource, we can justify almost anything. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. I know. Can you forgive me? There it was. The question I knew would come eventually. And I loved him enough not to lie. Not yet. He looked up. Pain crossed his face. But he did not argue. I want to, I said. But forgiveness isn't pretending something didn't happen. I understand. I need to trust you again. How I don't know yet. That was the truth. Michael nodded slowly. I'll figure it out. Not you'll see. Not I promise. I'll figure it out. That sounded different. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet. I came here to show you this. It was David Mercer's restructuring plan. Michael had agreed to sell his newer truck, reduce the company to one core crew, end the warehouse lease at the earliest permitted date, negotiate formal payment schedules with suppliers, stop taking new projects unless deposits covered initial costs, and disclose the full financial situation to Natalie. You agreed to all of it, I asked. Yes. That must hurt. It does. He gave a tired smile. Apparently that's the point. I almost heard Thomas laughing. Michael looked at the piano again. I'll repay the 6,500. I know you will. It might take a while. That's all right. No. He shook his head. I don't want you to say that anymore. I frowned. Say what? That it's all right. He looked directly at me. It wasn't all right. For the first time I believed he understood. Michael stood and walked to the piano. His fingers hovered above the scratch he had made as a child. I did that with a red truck. You remember Dad made me apologize to the piano. I laughed. He did. I thought he was crazy. You were 9. Michael smiled through wet eyes. Mom, yes, don't sell it. I studied him. A few weeks earlier, he had wanted me to turn the piano into nearly $90,000. Now he was asking me to keep it. I'm not planning to. Good. He kissed my cheek before leaving. After the door closed, I returned to the bench. I played the first few notes of Always Again. This time I did not finish. I simply rested my hands on the keys. Michael had cried. He had apologized. He had finally begun facing his debts. But Thomas had taught me one more lesson I intended to remember. Words spoken during pain can be sincere. That does not make them proof of change. Change would come later, quietly, in choices nobody applauded, in payments made when nobody was watching, in things Michael was willing to give up instead of asking someone else to sacrifice. And over the months that followed, that was exactly what began to happen. What my son finally sold. Change did not arrive in Michael's life with a dramatic announcement. There was no single morning when he woke up transformed. There were no speeches, no miraculous contract that erased the debt, no wealthy client arriving at the last moment to rescue his company. Instead, change arrived through a series of uncomfortable decisions. The first was his truck. Michael loved that truck. It was a black, fully loaded pickup he had bought 18 months earlier because, as he once told me, clients expected a successful contractor to look successful. Thomas would have had something to say about that. David Mercer certainly did. You are paying nearly $900 a month to advertise prosperity you don't currently have, David told him. Michael sold it. After paying off the remaining loan, there was not nearly as much money left as he had hoped. But the monthly payment disappeared. He replaced it with an 8-year-old work truck with scratches along one side and more than 100,000 miles on the odometer. The first time he drove it to my house, I walked outside and looked at it. Well, he asked. Well, what? You're not going to say anything. It has 4 wheels. He laughed. Dad would hate it. No, your father would love the payment. Michael laughed harder. It was the first time we had joked naturally since the piano disappeared. The warehouse came next. He negotiated an early exit from the lease and moved essential equipment into a smaller rented storage unit. Then he reduced his operation to 1 crew. That decision hurt the most. 2 employees found work elsewhere. 1 stayed. Michael told each of them the truth. No promises, no excuses. He had expanded too quickly and could no longer support the overhead. For a man who had spent years trying to appear successful, admitting failure publicly was almost physically painful. But he did it. Natalie made changes too. They canceled a planned vacation, stopped eating out several times a week, sold a recreational trailer they rarely used. For the first time in years, they created a household budget together. Michael later told me that the first evening they reviewed every expense. Natalie cried. Not because of what they had to give up, because she finally understood how much he had hidden. Their marriage did not repair itself immediately. Trust rarely does. But at least they were arguing about the truth. Every month an envelope arrived at my house. The first contained $300. Inside was a check and a small note. Piano repayment. One of however many it takes. The second month, $400. Then $250. Then $500 after Michael finished a profitable bathroom renovation. I deposited every check. I did not tell him to stop. The old version of me would have. Keep it, sweetheart. You need it more than I do. But repayment was not about whether I needed the money. It was about Michael finishing something he had created. 6 months after the piano returned, he came over on a Saturday morning. I was trimming roses in the backyard. He carried 2 cups of coffee. Peace offering. For what I need to tell you something. That sentence still made my stomach tighten. We sat on the patio. Michael handed me 1 coffee. I found something of Dad's. What a letter. My heart jumped. Another one not like yours. He reached into his jacket. The envelope was old and already opened. My name's on it. Where did you find it? In a box of paperwork I took from the garage after Dad died. I frowned. You took paperwork? Old business magazines, tax folders, things you said I could sort through. I vaguely remembered. Grief had made the months after Thomas's death blurry. I never opened this. Why, I don't know. I think I thought it was one of his notes about tools. He handed me the letter. You should read it. I hesitated. It was written to you. I know what it says. I unfolded it. Thomas's handwriting again. Michael, you are 35 years old as I write this, which means you are old enough for me to stop pretending every lesson needs to feel encouraging. I smiled despite myself. That sounds like him. Michael nodded. I continued. Thomas wrote about work, responsibility, debt. Then I reached a paragraph Michael had underlined. You are ambitious, and ambition is useful until you begin spending tomorrow's success today. I looked up. Michael stared into his coffee. The next sentence was even stronger. Never count money you have not earned, and never count what belongs to someone who is still alive. My chest tightened. Thomas had written that years before the spreadsheet. Years before my house became $640,000 of future capital. I kept reading. If you start counting what belongs to your mother before she's gone, you've already lost something more valuable than money. I stopped. Michael rubbed his eyes. He told me. Yes. I can't even say I didn't know. You forgot. No. He shook his head. I ignored him. That distinction mattered. Michael looked toward the house. I thought Dad didn't understand how business worked. Your father ran a woodworking shop for 22 years. I know. He understood bills. He didn't think big. I raised an eyebrow. Michael smiled sadly. That's what I used to tell myself. And now I think he understood how much was enough. We sat quietly. After a while, Michael said I thought the piano was something I could convert into time. What do you mean $6,500 bought me maybe 2 weeks? And what did it cost? He looked at me. Almost everything. I shook my head. You didn't almost lose everything. I almost lost you. The words were simple. They landed harder than any apology he had given me. You didn't lose me. I know. But you damaged something. Trust. Yes. Michael nodded. I thought selling this piano was the worst thing I did. It wasn't, no. He looked down at Thomas's letter. The worst thing was believing I had the right. There it was. The truth beneath everything. Not the debt. Not the appraisal. Not even the secret sale. Entitlement. Michael had begun seeing family love as access. Access to money. Access to property. Access to rescue. And somewhere along the way he stopped recognizing the difference between being loved and being owed. How's the business, I asked. Smaller. That wasn't my question. He smiled. Better. Profitable barely. Barely counts. That's what David says. And the debt coming down. How much still ugly? I laughed. At least you know the number now. Every penny. He pulled another envelope from his jacket. This month's payment. I opened it. $750. That's a lot. I finished a kitchen job. You sure? Yes. I put the envelope beside my coffee. Thank you. Michael nodded. Then he looked through the patio doors toward the living room. The piano was visible from where we sat. Have you decided what you'll do with it someday? I had been thinking about that for months. Yes. He looked at me. Rebecca, no. Me, no. He smiled. Probably wise. I want it to go somewhere it will be played. Where there's a non-profit music school downtown. They provide lessons to children whose families can't afford them. Michael looked surprised. You'd give away a $90,000 piano eventually? He was quiet. Then he smiled. Dad would like that. Yes, so do I. That was the moment I knew something fundamental had changed. Months earlier, Michael's first reaction to the appraisal had been, we could sell it properly. Now faced with the idea of receiving nothing from it, he smiled. Not because he had stopped needing money, not because his problems had disappeared, but because he had finally stopped believing every valuable thing near him needed to solve his problems. I looked at my son and understood what he had really sold the day he removed that piano from my home: trust. And unlike the piano trust, could not simply be purchased back for $500. It had to be restored slowly, payment by payment, choice by choice, month by month. Fortunately, Michael had finally stopped looking for the shortcut. The envelope inside the bench. 1 year after Samuel Carter stood on my porch holding Thomas's yellowed envelope, I turned 69. I woke that morning before sunrise. For several minutes I stayed beneath the covers listening to the house. The refrigerator hummed downstairs. A truck passed somewhere beyond the bedroom window. And when I finally walked into the living room, the first thing I saw was the piano. It was exactly where it belonged. Morning light touched the mahogany, revealing every little imperfection Samuel had carefully preserved: the scratch Michael made with his toy truck, a faint mark Rebecca left with a bracelet during high school, a tiny chip Thomas once promised to repair and never did. For most of my life, I thought preserving something meant keeping it perfect. I understood differently now. Sometimes the marks are the history. I made coffee and sat beside the piano. On top of it was Thomas's photograph. Beside that sat the yellowed envelope. I no longer kept the original documents inside it. Margaret had insisted the appraisal restoration records and Thomas's letter belonged in a secure fireproof box, but I kept the envelope. For Leah, if this piano ever leaves our family. Thomas had been right. The piano had left, and somehow when it returned, our family had begun returning too. Around 11, Rebecca arrived carrying flowers and a chocolate cake. Her husband followed with enough food to feed 20 people. Michael and Natalie arrived shortly afterward. Then came my granddaughter Emily, who was 11 and had recently become fascinated with the piano. "Grandma, can we practice today, before cake?" She nodded seriously. "That is commitment." Michael laughed. She didn't get that from me. The joke would have been painful a year earlier. Now it made us smile. His business still existed. Smaller. Much smaller. The warehouse was gone. One truck was gone. The second crew was gone. But the company was profitable again. More importantly, Michael knew whether it was profitable. Every month he reviewed the numbers with Natalie. Every month another payment toward the $500 arrived. He had not finished repaying me yet. I no longer worried about whether he would. After lunch, everyone moved into the living room. Rebecca brought out the cake. 69 candles would have been ridiculous, so she used 2 number candles. Michael disappeared into the hallway. When he returned, he carried an envelope. No box, no ribbon, just an envelope. "Happy birthday, Mom." I accepted it. "What is this?" "Read it later." Rebecca immediately protested. "No, she has to open it now." Michael laughed nervously. "I'd rather she didn't." That made me curious. I opened it. Inside were several handwritten pages. At the top, Michael had written, "Mom, I tried to buy you something for your birthday, but everything felt stupid." I looked up. He was staring at the floor, so I continued, "I owe you an apology that doesn't contain the word but." That sentence alone nearly made me cry. "I sold your piano. You told me no, and I decided my emergency mattered more than your answer. I lied to myself that I was helping everyone. The truth is simpler. I was scared, ashamed, and desperate, and I treated something you loved like it belonged to me." I swallowed hard. The room had become completely silent. Michael wrote about Thomas, about the letter he had ignored, about his business, about Natalie, about the spreadsheet. "I am most ashamed that I put your house under future capital. I can see now how ugly that was. I was counting a future that required you not to be in it." Rebecca covered her mouth. Natalie reached for Michael's hand. I kept reading. "I used to think Dad was trying to stop me from becoming successful. Now I understand he was trying to stop me from becoming the kind of man who measured success by what he could acquire. You refusing to give me money felt cruel at first. It wasn't. You gave me something harder. You gave me responsibility back. My vision blurred. The final paragraph was shorter. I don't expect you to forget what I did. I just hope that when you look at me now, you can see someone trying to become trustworthy again. I love you. Michael. I folded the pages. Michael finally looked at me. Well, I stood. He looked frightened. I walked across the room and wrapped my arms around him. He held me tightly. I forgive you, I whispered. His shoulders shook. It was the first time I had said those words. Not because the debt had disappeared, not because 12 months had magically erased what happened. I forgave him because I no longer needed his past mistake to protect me from his future behavior. His actions had changed. That was enough. After cake, Emily pulled me toward the piano. You promised. I did. She sat beside me. I placed her right thumb on middle C. Relax your wrist. I am relaxed. You look like you're preparing for surgery. Everyone laughed. She rolled her eyes. Then she played the first 5 notes of the little melody we had been practicing. Michael watched from the sofa. For a moment I saw him at 6 years old again. Same piano, same uncertain fingers, same family, different lesson. Later, after everyone went home, I returned to the living room. Michael's birthday letter remained on the piano. I picked it up. Then I looked at Thomas's old envelope. An idea came to me. I went upstairs and found a fresh cream-colored envelope in my desk. Inside, I placed a copy of Thomas's personal letter, then Michael's birthday letter. 2 generations of men, 2 warnings, 2 different kinds of apology. I sealed the envelope. On the front, I wrote, "For whoever sits here after me." Then I lifted the piano bench. The padded seat had been reupholstered years earlier. Along the underside was a loose section of fabric. I carefully tucked the envelope beneath it. Not because I wanted another secret, because I wanted whoever eventually sat there to understand what the piano had taught us. I had already arranged its future. After my death, the Steinway would go to a non-profit music school in Richmond that provided lessons to children whose families could not afford private instruction. Michael knew, Rebecca knew. Neither objected. The piano would leave our family again someday. But next time it would leave with permission. And instead of being converted into emergency cash, it would become music in the hands of children who needed an opportunity. I sat down. My fingers still hurt. Arthritis had not disappeared simply because my story had found a happier chapter. I began playing always, slowly, imperfectly. Thomas had played that song when he asked me to build a life with him. Decades later, his hidden letter had helped me understand something about that life. We cannot control what our children become. We can love them, teach them, help them, warn them. And sometimes when helping becomes harmful, we must step aside and allow consequences to finish the lesson. The piano was worth somewhere around $90,000. But that number no longer impressed me. Its real value was sitting beneath my fingers. A marriage, 2 children, a granddaughter learning music, a mistake that nearly divided us, and a second chance nobody could have purchased. I played the final chord. Then I looked at Thomas's photograph. You were right, I whispered. I smiled. Don't get too pleased with yourself. And for just a moment in the quiet room, I could almost hear him laughing at the fan 15. Life taught me something through that old piano that I wish I had understood years earlier. There is a difference between helping someone you love and protecting them from every consequence of their choices. For years, whenever Michael struggled, I believed being a good mother meant finding a way to make the struggle disappear. Money, a loan, another chance, one more rescue. I thought I was showing him love. Thomas understood something I did not. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to carry a burden that belongs to someone else. That does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean abandoning our children when they make mistakes. And it certainly does not mean enjoying their pain. It means remembering that our children cannot become responsible adults if we keep paying the price of their irresponsibility. I also learned that inheritance is not a promise children can spend while their parents are still alive. Your home is still your home. Your savings are still your savings. Your possessions are still yours. Growing older does not turn your life into someone else's future estate. And forgiveness does not require forgetting. I forgave Michael only after I saw that his apology had become behavior. He sold his truck. He faced his debts. He told Natalie the truth. He repaid what he owed month by month. He stopped asking everyone around him to protect the image he had created. Trust returned slowly because Michael rebuilt it slowly. That made the forgiveness real. So let me ask you something. If your son sold something this precious without your permission, could you forgive him? Would you have taken the piano back, or would you have sold it after discovering how valuable it was? And do you think I was right to refuse Michael the money when his business was collapsing? Tell me what you would have done in the comments. I especially love hearing where people are watching from, so tell me your city or state and what time it is where you are. If this story reminded you that love and boundaries can exist together, please like the video and subscribe for more stories about family, betrayal consequences, forgiveness, and the strength it sometimes takes to finally say no. Because sometimes the most valuable inheritance we leave our children is not the house, the savings, or even an antique piano. Sometimes it is the lesson they finally learn when we stop rescuing them. What happened with that old piano taught me something. I wish I had understood much earlier in life. Loving someone does not mean protecting them from every consequence of their choices. For years, I believed being a good mother meant stepping in whenever my children struggled. If Michael was frightened, I wanted to calm him. If he made a financial mistake, I wanted to help him recover. If he fell, my instinct was always to place something soft beneath him. I called that love. But sometimes, when we repeatedly rescue the people we love, we quietly teach them that someone else will always pay the price for their decisions. Thomas understood what took me years to accept. There comes a moment when our children need more than our protection. They need our boundaries. They need to hear no. They need the dignity of facing a difficult situation, making painful choices, and discovering that they are capable of rebuilding their own lives. I also learned that growing older does not mean surrendering ownership of your future. Your home is still your home. Your savings are still your savings. The things carrying the memories of your marriage and your life still belong to you. An inheritance is a gift given someday, not money anyone has the right to count while you are still here living your life. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that forgiveness and consequences can exist together. I forgave Michael, but I did not erase what happened. He had to rebuild my trust through actions, telling the truth, facing his debts, repaying what he owed, and accepting responsibility without excuses. That was what made our reconciliation meaningful. In the end, the piano was worth far more than Michael imagined. But its greatest value was never the number written on an appraisal. It carried decades of love, mistakes, memories, grief, music, and ultimately a second chance for our family. Sometimes the greatest legacy we leave our children isn't money or property. It's the wisdom to stand on their own. Now I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Could you forgive Michael after what he did? Or would that betrayal have gone too far? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read and appreciate your different perspectives. And if this story touched your heart or reminded you of something from your own family, please subscribe to the channel and join us for more emotional stories about family betrayal, boundaries, forgiveness, and finding strength when life asks us to make the hardest choices.